Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is the second video in my Postural Analysis series. My first video in the series goes over tips to help you be successful in your postural analysis and the side view of the postural analysis. If you haven't already watched it, I suggest you start there. I will leave it linked below. This video is going to cover the postural analysis, front and back view. One thing to note when you're doing your PA from the front and back view, you're doing it from your client's perspective. So when you look at the right foot or the right shoulder, it's going to be their right foot, their right shoulder, not yours. After completing the side view, our postural analysis checklist tells us to go over the front view of the body next. Once again, starting with the feet. When looking at the feet, we are trying to determine if they are neutral, inverted and supinated, or everted and pronated. You want to make sure that your client stands as natural as they would naturally stand. According to our Bony landmark reference, we are trying to distinguish where the weight is distributed on the foot. To find neutral, we're looking for all 10 toes to be equally weighted. And according to our support material, the outer malleolus and the outer margin of the sole of the foot are in the same vertical plane so that the foot is not pronated or supinated. One IT pointed out that you could use a pen and align that along the lateral malleolus and the lateral border of the foot. If those line up, then you have neutral. Supinated is when there's more weight on the outside of the foot. Usually that lateral malleolus will stick out farther than the border of the foot. You will see more weight on the pinky toes and the big toes might lift up. And inverted is when the toes are rotated internally, pointing in. Pronated is when there's more weight on the inside of the foot, and usually the lateral malleolus is more medial to the lateral border of the foot. Therefore, the side of the foot sticks out more than that malleolus. And everted is when the toes point out. The next thing we're going to look at are the knees. Make sure your client is standing with their feet together. You want to determine if the client is either neutral, knock-kneed, or bow-legged. If the client is knock-kneed or has genu valgum, you will see that their knees come together before their feet do. Or that if they bring their feet all the way together, there's a lot of discomfort between the knees. If your client has bow legs or genu varum, that means that their feet will come together, but their knees will not touch, and you will be able to see a space between the knees. Keep in mind, some people may be so medially rotated or hyperextended in the knees, it may look like they are bow-legged when they are not. I was taught to have the client bend their knees with their feet together and then stand straight up to determine if they are bow-legged, knock-kneed, or very deeply medially rotated or hyperextended. Next up is the pelvis from the front view. From the front, we are going to determine if the pelvis is level, elevated on the right or the left, or rotated either clockwise or counterclockwise. To determine if the pelvis is elevated on the right or left, we are going to palpate the ASIS at the front of the hips and see if one hand is higher than the other. We can also place flat hands at the very top of the iliac crest, parallel to the floor, and determine if one hip is higher than the other. The next thing we're going to look at is if the pelvis is rotated either clockwise or counterclockwise or neutral. To determine any rotation in the pelvis, you will once again place your fingers at the front of the hip bone, the ASIS. Kind of look more down and see if one finger is more towards you than the other. If they're even, then they are neutral. But if one hand is closer, it'll be the client's side that's closer. That's the rotation that pelvis is in. Next up will be the rib cage. This has just a little bit more. Like the pelvis, we're looking for elevation and rotation in the rib cage. But we are also looking for a shift either to the right or the left in the rib cage. To determine if there is a shift in the rib cage, we will once again palpate the ASIS at the front of the hip bone and the bottom of the rib cage. So you'll have your thumb on the ASIS and your pointer finger on the bottom of the rib cage. If those two bony landmarks are aligned, then it's neutral. However, you will be able to tell if the rib cage is shifted more to the right or to the left by looking at the bottom of the rib cage in relation to those ASIS bony landmarks. Again, it will be to the client's right or left. You will also be able to determine if there is elevation on either the right or the left by comparing the bottom of the rib cage. To determine rotation of the rib cage, you will look both at and down at the sternum. When using the plumb line, you want the plumb line to go right through the center of the torso. From there, you can tell if one side is more towards you than the other. If you are practicing and you don't have a plumb line, that's fine. You want to see if one side of the sternum is either closer or farther away from you. Next up is the shoulders, and we're essentially just looking to see if there's elevation in the shoulders or depression in the shoulders. To determine this, we are going to place one finger at the very front top of the sternum, your sternoclavicular joint. And then we're going to draw a line to the acromion process. This is that front bony landmark at the shoulder joint. If those two bony landmarks are aligned, your shoulder is level. However, if the acromion process is higher, then that means that you have an elevated shoulder. If that acromion process is lower, then you have a depressed shoulder joint. You will be able to better determine the elevation and depression when you confirm from the back. The last thing we're going to look at from our postural analysis on the front of the body is going to be the head. When looking at the head, we want to determine if it is rotated clockwise, counterclockwise, neutral, tilted, or shifted. Compare the chin to the sternum to determine alignment. If they line up, you have a neutral head. However, if the chin is more to the right or to the left, then you will notice a shift. Also, if the head is tilted to the right or to the left, you will notice a tilt. And then the last thing that we are looking for is that clockwise or counterclockwise rotation in the head. And so that's it for the front view of the postural analysis. Now on to the back. Just like the side view and the front view, we are once again starting at the feet. And like the front view, we are determining if the feet are neutral, inverted / supinated, or everted / pronated. And from the back, we can determine that by looking at the calcaneal tendons, aka the Achilles tendons. If they are more or less straight, then they are neutral. If they bow out to the side laterally like a bowl of soup, then they are supinated. And if they bow more internally, then they are pronated or everted. Next up are the femurs. So we are trying to determine if the femurs are neutral, medially rotated or internally rotated in the hip joint, or laterally rotated or externally rotated in the hip joint. If you remember my anatomical video that I made a while back, the hip joint and the shoulder joint are the only places where you have that medial or lateral rotation. To determine if there is rotation in the femurs, you will palpate the femoral epicondyles, which are right on the sides of the knees. If one finger is closer to your body than the other, then you will determine if there is medial rotation or lateral rotation. If the fingers are aligned, then you have a neutral femur. You can often see that rotation in the femurs by looking at the indentations in the back of the knee. Once again, we have the pelvis, this time from the back view. It will be almost the same as analyzing it from the front. Once again, we can place our hands flat at the top of the iliac crest to determine if one hand is higher than the other. This should confirm what you discovered at the front of the pelvis. We will also look at the PSIS at the back of that pelvis to determine if one side is higher than the other, to determine elevation, and we will also compare the PSIS to determine if one finger is closer to us than the other to see if there's any rotation in the pelvis. Again, this should confirm what we found in the front of the pelvis. To find the PSIS, you can palpate the back of the hips and find that bony landmark. But you can also ask your client to pull their pants down just a bit, and it will normally be those two indentations at the back of the pelvis. Next up is the scapula. So you have a lot going on here in the shoulder blades. We will determine if they are neutral, protracted, retracted, elevated, depressed, upwardly rotated, downwardly rotated, and we will look for any winging or tipping. Protraction, retraction, upward and downward rotation, and elevation and depression are all movements that happen in the shoulder joints. According to our support material, in good alignment, the scapula lie flat against the upper back, approximately between the 2nd and 7th vertebrae of the thoracic spine, and about 4 inches apart, depending on the size of the body. To find protraction or retraction, you will first need to find the medial border of the scapula and the spinous process, and then compare the distance between the two. In my course, we were told that the distance between the spinous process and the medial border should be somewhere between 3 to 4 fingers. If it is more than that, then your scapula are protracted. If you can't fit 3 to 4 fingers between the spine and the scapula, then there is retraction on that side. One thing I forgot to do here was compare my fingers to my client's fingers. So before you measure out your client's protraction and retraction in the scapula, you want to measure up your 3 fingers to your client's 3 fingers and then make any adjustments for that. If you have someone who is larger or smaller than you, then your fingers might not be the same width as their fingers. And you do need to do this for your exam. Next, we're going to look for any upward or downward rotation in the scapula. You will need to find the superior angle of the scapula and the inferior angle and compare the two. If they are aligned, then you have a neutral scapula. However, if the inferior angle is more lateral to the superior angle of the scapula, then you have upward rotation. And if the inferior angle of the scapula is more medial or internal to the superior angle of the scapula, then you have downward rotation. Next up is elevation and depression, and there's a lot to this one. Make sure that you know the spine. So know that you have 7 cervical vertebrae, and after that you have 12 thoracic vertebrae. In the ideal alignment, the superior angle of the scapula aligns with the 2nd vertebrae of the thoracic spine. But to find the 2nd thoracic vertebrae, you first need to find the 7th cervical vertebrae. Now, I've been taught this 2 ways. The first way is to have the client bend their neck forwards, and then it should be the most prominent vertebrae. The second way is to have the client turn their head from side to side, and then that should be the vertebrae that moves. The vertebrae underneath it does not move. That would be your T1. You'll walk your finger down to T2, and then you found your 2nd thoracic vertebrae. I have linked in the description box below some other videos that are a little bit more clear on how to find the C7 and the T2. If the superior angle of the scapula is higher than the T2, then you have an elevated scapula. And if you find that the superior angle of the scapula is lower than that T2 vertebrae, then you have a depressed scapula. Again, this should confirm what you found at the front view of the shoulders, or it might clarify what you found at the front of the shoulders. Last up in the scapula is winging and tipping. Winging will be when the medial border of the scapula is lifted away from the rib cage, enough where you could potentially slide a hand underneath it. And tipping is when the inferior angle of the scapula is lifted away from the rib cage, enough where you could potentially slide a hand underneath it. Next up are the humori, and we will determine if they are neutral or medially rotated. We will palpate the Ohlkranz process by placing the hands at the side of the elbow joint. If the hand closest to the body is closer to you, then you have medial rotation. You can also see if there is medial rotation if the palms of the hands are facing more towards you at the back, and if the palms are facing in towards the client's hips and legs, then you have neutral humeri. I'm not really doing it right here in the video because I was holding the camera, but that's where you want to palpate. The last thing you'll have your body do in the postural analysis is a roll down, and you will be looking from the side and the back. Have your client do this no more than 3 times. And on the last time from the back, you will place flat hands on either side of the spine. As they roll down, you will feel for any imbalances. From the side, you are looking for any flat areas and noting where that is. And from the back, you are looking for and feeling for any imbalances and noting where those are. In your exam, after you finish your postural analysis, you need to give a stated focus. This stated focus is where you will say what you're going to do to help with the imbalances that you found in your client's body. Example, if there is kyphosis, you're probably going to want to have your client work in extension at some point. If you find that there's unevenness in the pelvis or the rib cage, you will probably want to incorporate some kind of oblique work. In your support materials book, you have examples of exercise programming that you can use for those different types of postural alignments that you will find in various bodies. So when you are practicing for your exam, just make sure that you also look up what exercises you need to do in order to help with the alignment for the bodies that you have. The postural analysis is worth 10 points of your exam, and the stated focus is also worth 10 points of your exam. So make sure you include that stated focus. And that's it for the video. Thank you so very much for watching this. If you have any notes that you picked up from your course, please feel free to share that information in the comments below so that you can help other instructors. If you have any questions, please make sure to leave those in the comments below. And I just want to thank you all for the positive comments that you left on my last video. Hopefully this one is also helpful for you. Also, I know that my website has been down for a while. I am working on that. I think it should be up and running soon. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.